Hello, and welcome to the Episcopal Church of St. James the Less online. Today we are celebrating the fourth Sunday of Lent, and even though most of us are wisely staying home and practicing social distancing, I hope we can still enjoy some music together. And in addition to the music, I want to tell you about the surprising origin of the hymn, "There is a Balm in Gilead." So, today's gospel reading is from the book of John, chapter 9, and it's about healing, which is appropriate in this time of coronavirus. Specifically, John tells the story of Jesus healing the man born blind. So, let's open with the great healing spiritual, "There is a Balm in Gilead." Feel free to listen, sing along, hum along, and if you are a member of one of our children's choirs, you can make up hand motions and teach them to me when we get back together. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain, but then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot preach like Paul, you can tell the love of Jesus and say he died for all. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Now, we know this hymn as an African-American spiritual, but it was first published in the 1800s by an Ohio music teacher named Washington Glass. And he had attached this newly written chorus, the part that goes, "There is a balm in Gilead," to another hymn by the British Reverend John Newton, who we know as the author of Amazing Grace. Back in 1779, John Newton had published his hymns Amazing Grace and The Good Physician in a collection called Only Hymns. So here's the opening of Good Physician. I'm going to read it to you, and notice how close it sounds to Balm in Gilead. "How lost was my condition till Jesus made me whole. There is but one physician can cure a sin-sick soul." So, as often happens, Washington Glass's hymn entered the American vernacular, and through oral tradition in the African American church, words got changed around, verses were added, and it became the Balm in Gilead we know today. Its verses speak about resilience, revival, and evangelism. And notice how each verse moves from weakness to wholeness. First we feel discouraged, but then we are revived. We might not be the best singers or preachers in the world, but we can still reveal Jesus' love. That's what happened to the blind man when Jesus healed him. The Reverend Fred Pratt Green writes about this story in his hymn called "He Healed the Darkness of My Mind." This is an unusual hymn because we sing it from the blind man's point of view. So I'm going to sing the three verses here. Notice how it echoes Amazing Grace at the ends of verses 2 and 3. my sight to me. It was not sin that made me blind, it was no sinner made me see. Let others call my faith a lie, or try to stir up doubt in me. Look at me now, none can deny, I once was blind, but now I see. Ask me not how, but I know who has opened up new worlds to me. This Jesus does what none can do. I once was blind and now I see. You'll remember that when Jesus' disciples asked him whether the man was blind because he had sinned, Jesus answered no. He said, he was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. Jesus healed the man, and it was the man's initial state of blindness that allowed others to see God's power at work. When we follow the ancient practice of giving things up for Lent, we're saying, to ourselves mostly, but also to God, that we trust God more than we trust our own circumstances. What if the blind man had been so consumed by despair that he refused to wash in the pool of Siloam, as Jesus had instructed him? Would he still have been healed? Would his eyes still have been opened? It takes courage to let go of all those things that make us feel stuck and closed off, like our despair, our plans for how things should be, and especially now that we're physically cooped up, we've all had to let go of our plans for the coming weeks. But if we remain open to God, we can still know God's wholeness. Pratt wrote another hymn of healing called O Christ the Healer. It's a prayer for wholeness, and it ponders the question, how will God be revealed in the midst of our human weakness? So I'll play through the first 3 verses here. O Christ the Healer, we have come to pray for health, to plead for friends. How can we fail to be restored when reached by love that never ends? From every ailment flesh endures, our bodies clamor to be freed, yet in our hearts we would confess that wholeness is our deepest need. How strong, O Lord, are our desires, how weak our knowledge of ourselves. Release in us those healing truths. Unconscious pride resists ourselves. The choreographer Martha Graham once said something about human creativity, but it applies to the whole of life as well. In her autobiography, she wrote, "There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, or how valuable, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours, clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. End quote. Now, we all have weaknesses. Making this video is making me very aware of my weaknesses, and I'm sure you're aware of yours as well. But what we see as an impediment, God sees as an opportunity. Where do we see God in the midst of our weaknesses? Looking around at our world that is suffering from the coronavirus and suffering from the fear of the coronavirus, where do we see God's love and strength finding opportunities to break into the world? The blind man remained open to Jesus. He probably would not have described it that way, but Jesus used his blindness to open his eyes and to open the eyes of all those around him. So as we go about our daily lives, even now as we travel a much smaller path than we usually do, we reveal in our own unrepeatable ways the love of God that breathes through all creation. So, to emphasize that, we'll close with a hymn by the Reverend Timothy Reese, God is Love, Let Heaven Adore Him. And please sing or hum along. Well, thank you for joining me this morning, and I pray for your health and well-being and safety, and may we flatten the curve for the next few weeks until we see each other in person once again. Thank you.